I just played every Elder Scrolls game ever made, spanning decades across multiple platforms, including some disasters that could have ended the Elder Scrolls before it became one of the biggest series of all time.
We're very, very close to going out of business.
For example, a game that can only be played on whatever this is. Today, Bethesda's a household name. The Fallout series, publishing massive FPS staples like Doom and Wolfenstein, and now an absolute banger of a TV show on Amazon Prime.
The guy was f***ing my chickens.
But things weren't always this way. All the way back in 1994, Bethesda started laying the foundation for what would eventually become a cultural phenomenon.
Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. I was fed to the rules, but I hit the ground running.
I began my journey in the Elder Scrolls Chapter 1, Arena. Originally planned as a medieval gladiator game, where you fight in coliseums against other players, the devs kinda got a little ambitious and started building towns and cities outside of these arenas, then dungeons to explore and everything in between. Soon enough, they were taking inspiration from Ultima, the most popular RPG at the time, and had crafted an entire continent, Tamriel. Until now, I had no idea how big this game's map actually was. Not only is it the largest of all of the Elder Scrolls games, but it completely overshadows like everything. Well, almost everything. It's not as big as Elite Dangerous, but it sits at just over 8 million kilometers squared. In actuality, you're not able to travel across the entire map on foot. You do have to travel from like one major area to the next, but Arena has the entirety of Tamriel included in its map. This is where it all started for Elder Scrolls. You can visit Morrowind, the Imperial province of Cyrodiil where Oblivion takes place, or even Skyrim with actual major cities that you might recognize like Falkreath, Riften, and even Whiterun. And utilizing procedural generation, the game creates unique towns and dungeons throughout, with a day and night cycle that will change with every playthrough, just like No Man's Sky. Except they did this 30 years ago in 1994 and ran it on floppy disks with 8 megabytes of RAM on computers that sounded like a Boeing 747 when you start them up. I really thought this was going to be a quick, easy run through. For serious, this might have been the most difficult starter area I've ever played in a game. After selecting your class and what skills you want to put points into, is that William Montgomery from Kill Tony? Look at this guy. You're thrown into a dungeon that you have to escape before you can start the main quest where you have to find a staff that'll save the Emperor. Nowadays, this is where you're taught the mechanics and explained all the buttons you gotta know to play and all that stuff. But this was 1994. If you reached out for a game to hold your hand, the devs swatted it down and laughed in your face, spit on you, called you a nerd. Ah! I died again. I spent hours just trying to start my playthrough, learning how to attack. You have to hold right click and drag the mouse back and forth to punch. Oh, this is gonna be a blast. What's a symbol even mean? I want to kill the goblin, not give him a handy. But most importantly, you can't heal. So you just keep getting cut down by run-of-the-mill goblins until you finally find the portal to go outside. Hallelujah! This is what I imagine hell is like. When you make it to the surface, you can explore your first city with buildings you can enter and some that you can't. This lock has nothing to fear from you. Did I just get roasted by a door? There's traders. There's actually loads of NPCs all over the place. And you can talk to most of them, and some of them will help you on your quest. Most of the objectives are going to take you into dungeons where you face skeletons, whatever this guy is, and Deathclaws. There's Deathclaws. Before we go on, I think it's safe to assume you enjoy a captivating RPG experience, right? And it's probably likely that at some point you've had an interest in learning how to code. But similar to a game like Arena, getting started can be rough. Hit him! Hit him! Attack! What? How did I die? So this is the 5th video that I've done that's been sponsored by Boot.dev, and for good reason. I truly believe that somebody watching this right now is going to love their program. Basically, Boot.dev is an online self-paced platform designed to get you writing a ton of code, to get your hands on the keyboard in what feels like a captivating RPG experience. You earn XP, you level up, you get achievements, and complete quests to get a top spot on the global leaderboards. I believe that this is the best way to to really learn back-end web development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages. Worst case scenario, they offer a 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee if you don't feel like it's working for you, as well as a free demo of every single course and its interactive features. You don't do that unless it works. Click the link in the description box and use my code PLAYER2 to get 25% off your first payment to boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or your entire first year, depending on which subscription you choose. I feel like sometimes we just need somebody to tell us to go for it. I hope for somebody watching, this is that thing. Chapter 2 of The Elder Scrolls follows the story of Daggerfall. Unlike its predecessor, you can only travel within 2 provinces of Tamriel, High Rock and Hammerfell. However, Daggerfall does consist of over 200,000 square kilometers of land, with over 15,000 cities, towns, villages, dungeons filled with 750,000 NPCs. Also, contrasting Arena, Daggerfall is Bethesda's first game where you can walk across the entire map without fast traveling. YouTuber How Big Is the Map took on this feat, and his entire journey lasted about 69.5 hours. This required more heavy lifting from the development team than ever before. One of the lead designers, Julian LeFay, described Daggerfall as a game that they had to do all sorts of stupid patches for, as even with it being Bethesda's biggest success up to this point, selling over 100,000 copies in the first 2 days, the game's release was plagued with buggy code. Sound kind of familiar? But this is where it gets interesting. This sparked enthusiasts of the game to develop their own tools. This is well before official mod support was added to Bethesda games. The modders not only fixed several bugs, like they always do, but added a number of additional quests, graphical enhancements, and gameplay features that didn't even exist in the original title because they wanted to make the game that they enjoyed better. Or they were just some freaky little gamer boys. These were some of Bethesda's first major mod packs, created by independent modders such as Daedrefall and Andyfall. Additionally, you can play an entirely remade Daggerfall in Skyrim now. This right here is the foundation to what I think has made these games so awesome and so special. It pushes them past just being games. They become blank canvases, allowing the community to get involved and showcase their creativity. Today, Bethesda has one of the most active modding communities in the gaming industry, so you can experience the game in all new ways, virtually endlessly. From my perspective, this is one of the recurring themes and pillars of success for the Elder Scrolls. But the second pillar, I think, is a more controversial one. We're going to talk about that shortly. So Daggerfall begins with your old pal Earl Septim asking you for help to free the ghost of a king. And I totally forgot the beauty that was cutscenes in games in the mid-90s. In several games from this era, developers were really into making live action scenes with actual actors, and they were just glorious.
I ask this as your emperor and your friend.
Look at this guy. They were just like, yeah, just stand there with a torch and then look vacantly into the camera. After the intro, you're again thrown into a dungeon. I shall henceforth be known as T. Baggins, which I thought was going to be a different experience than Arena, considering I turned the enemies to the very slow modifier. Nope, I died multiple times. Oh, I died! But when I finally found the exit, you get one of those nice Bethesda staples, the step out moment. Basically where you complete the tutorial or intro area and you step out and get to see the world for the first time. I think that they've always done a pretty good job at making that moment impactful. Additionally, you're able to open your map and fast travel anywhere immediately, so long as you have the gold to get you there. And there are thousands of towns across Daggerfall to explore. I chose to head to Charon Town, cautiously. All of the NPCs were like 3 feet taller than me for some reason. What is this? What are you doing with your hand? Are you feeding the ducks? I don't like it. But the devs improved the overall look after Arena for sure, and started really leaning into how the inventory systems work, with better organized categories for weapons and armor, magic items, clothing, and ingredients to craft with. The town guards are still unforgiving. Do you wish to surrender to the city guards? I guess so. Hold! I surrendered! In between the main Elder Scrolls series, there were a couple lesser known spin-offs. The first one was 1997's An Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire. Encapsulating the original idea for the first title, this iteration had a feature that none of the games in the series even had, until Elder Scrolls Online multiplayer. In Battlespire, you can play with 2 to 8 players online or over LAN. If you're underage, that means connecting all of your computers to a central hub so that you can play together locally. This was pretty commonplace at the time for games like Doom or RTS titles like Command & Conquer, but nobody was doing anything like Battlespire. Before you enter a match, you create a comprehensive build with your character's race, their sex, with or without clothes. Yeah, there was the option to go full nude on a DOS game in 1997. The attributes page is the most in-depth out of any Bethesda game up to this point. There's so many options, it took me about an hour just to even press start on the game, after the 15 minutes that I'd already spent on the Create Thy Face page. This would make for some unique death matches with friends, but because that was almost 30 years ago and done through GameSpy, servers are no longer online. So the only way that I could play Battlespire was in single player mode. And just like the next game, it is very different from the typical Elder Scrolls formula. In Battlespire, there's no merchants, no towns, no fast traveling. Your objective is to rise through 7 levels in various realms of Oblivion, which really isn't a strong suit of these games in the first place, and some pretty out there voice acting. Did this imp really just ask me to look in his butthole? And with that being said, there were some major improvements in Battlespire. The character build menu, as we talked about earlier, the looting and inventory management systems, these all felt much more intuitive. And the addition of 2D sprites for their high level of detail over the blocky polygonal models that were used for most NPCs at the time. But I don't know what it is about 2D demon sprites stalking you in a 3D environment, but it's unsettling. I think this is the way that I need to go. Ah, no! Shut the door! Shut the door! With 1998's Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. But seriously, I don't know who thought it was a good idea to change the names like every game. Elder Scrolls Legend, Adventures, just pick one. Just pick one. That tester that was initially brought on to do the port for Arena has now been with Bethesda for 4 years and is finally given his shot to lead his first project. If you don't know his name by now, you definitely know these 3 words.
This just works.
Todd Howard, or as I call him, Hot Toddy, was entirely responsible for one of the last games ever made on DOS. Before moving on to Windows 98 to add
16 times the detail.
I couldn't help it, I'm sorry. But this put Redguard in a uniquely disastrous position to flop even harder than Battlespire did. Built specifically for the 3DFX Voodoo 2 graphics card, pushing it to the limits of 3D acceleration capabilities at the time. If you're unfamiliar with this graphics card, it's because basically nobody had it. The game was one of the most graphically impressive ever built on DOS, but it just couldn't even compete with other games that were releasing that year. Most notably Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is still one of the best games ever made, so comparing the two isn't really fair. In just 2 short years after Redguard's release, 3DFX shuts down and stops all support for their products, making way for the behemoth that is NVIDIA Graphics, which is likely what you use in your computer today. So betting on the wrong horse, Bethesda kinda created a game that went out of date faster than any game ever. Even running it on my NVIDIA RTX 3080 Ti, I had several problems with the FPS and animations. It just doesn't work well on NVIDIA cards. This guy hasn't hit me once. So this game doesn't use the mouse at all. You attack with control and your health is a candlestick for whatever reason. The aesthetic of the environment and the characters and the continuously playing unstoppable ambience music made me feel like I wasn't so much in an Elder Scrolls game, but more of like a RuneScape. He said, "Barr." I just can't do this combat system and then coupled with these voice lines. Overall, the game flopped in Todd Howard's words. Same as Battlespire, there were just aspects of the original 2 games that people were craving. You play as a non-customizable pre-made character. The map is a grain of sand compared to Daggerfall and Arena, with 0 side quests, just the main storyline. So with 2 games now bombing in a row at the end of the millennia, just like 3DFX, Bethesda began spiraling into what looked like going out of business. So Todd Howard rallied their programmers, their level designers, their artists for one final shot with the most ambitious project that they'd ever done. This load screen still haunts my dreams. I can vividly remember being 8 years old. It's the summer of 2002 and going over to my friend's house, and he pulls out his Xbox, pops in Morrowind, and shows me my first ever open world RPG experience. You could go anywhere without following a linear storyline. You could be anything, like an archer or an acrobat. So we did what pretty much any prepubescent gamers would do and spent the entire night eating pizza and killing everybody in town and taking all their clothes because it made us feel funny. I'd never played anything with this much freedom of choice. I was blown away, like the people of Nagasaki. Here's Morrowind is really the most important game of the series. After the previous two Bethesda failures, this was their make or break moment. If it failed, Bethesda was done, but it didn't. This is because the first pillar of Bethesda's success, the mod community, received its first official mod support system for a Bethesda game with the Morrowind construction set, allowing anyone to change anything about the game on an intuitive menu for the first time. And the second pillar, which I'm gonna step out on a limb now and say is Todd Howard,
How dare you?
started excelling in unison, shaping the future for what the franchise would eventually become. Now, of course, there were several more Bethesda employees involved, but I doubt that Morrowind would be the game that it is without Todd. Let me explain. Other Bethesda employees wanted to use the same formula as Daggerfall, with a massive procedurally generated map, dungeons, towns, everything. But Todd insisted on the smaller map, which ended up a little under half the size of Skyrim, but filled to the brim with handcrafted quests, NPCs, and POIs, so players could have unique experiences that felt genuine and immersive, not generic. If Todd wasn't there, Morrowind would have likely been a much larger world, with POIs spread few and far between that look vaguely similar. Almost, I don't know, like a game I can't think of. It'll come to me. This is where the third pillar of Elder Scrolls success comes in. As Morrowind's lead designer calls it, a free-form experience. That feeling of creating your own unique adventure that can be completely different with every playthrough. That really comes into fruition here. I haven't played Morrowind since the mid-2000s, so if I'm being honest, this is probably the one I'm most excited to play again, just to experience it as an adult, especially after just playing all of its predecessors, so that we both can kind of comprehend the steps and the effort that it took to get it to this point. These load screens are so much faster than I remember. And funny, I always thought it was just me until that interview a couple years ago.
When Morrowind loads, sometimes you get a very long load. That's us rebooting the Xbox.
You could have just told us, Todd. Literally got into an argument one time because my younger brother put a scratch on it, and I was dead set that that's why it was loading so long. But replaying through the intro in retrospect, I think I can reasonably say that this is the biggest graphical leap in the entire series so far. To go from this to this in just a few short years, it's pretty extraordinary if you think about it. When you exit the starting area, more so than any game in the series up to this point, there is this lack of narrative urgency. There is a central plot point, but it's almost background to everything that's right in front of you right now. Because the game is handcrafted, everywhere you look, there could be something new, something unique that you haven't seen before. It seems to be a small garden gnome named Tarheel. Did not expect that kind of physique under that robe, to be honest with you, Tarheel. One of the countless discursive side quests given to you by a variety of factions, guilds, or religious organizations. The game just seems to follow whatever path you choose, and then craft a story around it. It's what makes tabletop Dungeons and Dragons so engaging. On your way to Balamar, off in the distance you see a cave. Do you want to enter? Now this is the first game where they made it where you can actually filter between first and third person. But unlike its successors, the combat is on an RNG system, similar to Daggerfall and Arena. Each swing, even if you're dead on, has a percentage-based chance to hit and a chance to miss or critical strike, which I think most of us agree it's not ideal, but I do get why some people would appreciate that. But I mean, when I shoot you in the face with an arrow, you better have an arrow in your head. Other than that, this game was unmatched in 2002, as Morrowind had massive success on PC and has become the second most played Xbox title under Halo Combat Evolved. So going into 2003, Bethesda is flying high, creating a moddable, freeform experience that players will interact with for years, all being spearheaded by Bethesda's monkey wrench, Todd Howard. Might be a good time to start working on the follow-up, but what does every company do when they hit the top? They start throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. That's where this comes in. Now today, mobile games are everywhere. The Apple and Android stores are filled with thousands of games from all genres, from basic tappy-tappies all the way to entire first-person shooter experiences that are similar to consoles. But not so long ago, in the year 2003, actually that's a really long time ago, never was that more apparent than asking my kid to help me set up this scene that you see right here.
Do you know what that is?
No.
You don't know what that is? You take a guess.
A mini laptop?
A mini what?
Laptop.
A mini laptop.
Yes.
She thought a Nokia was an old laptop. So clearly, mobile gaming in this era was a bit complicated. There was no app store where you could just go and buy games easily like you do now. You had to have the right phone to run a game. Then you had to make sure it was the right service provider for that game. And then you had to go to the game's website to get instructions on how to download the game onto your phone's browser. I don't remember much from my flip phone days, but I can vividly remember showing my buddy a YouTube video on my Motorola Razr in 2007, and my parents flipped out. They ended up getting a $40 bill in the mail for like the 5 to 10 minutes that I spent on the internet. Even so, after Morrowind, ZeniMax Media, who now owned Bethesda, was like, Elder Scrolls needs to be everywhere now. And so Elder Scrolls Travel's Stormhold was born, and then Dawnstar in 2004. But can you play these games today? Yes, but it's not easy. You'll have to get an emulator and follow a setup guide, which I'm positive I cannot link below. But I don't know, if you were to go onto Google and search Elder Scrolls Travels J2ME or how to play Elder Scrolls Travels, I'm sure Google will hook you up. Both of these games are the most limited of the entire series. The experience is entirely dungeon-based, moving one block at a time with combat that is based on your race, class, weapons, spells, you know, the typical stuff, and spamming the number pad on your phone to use different attacks when you come across enemies. It was so repetitive and really just visually exhaustive, because the dungeons are all the same textures and they all kind of start to blend in after a while. But then in late 2004 came Shadowkey. Even though it worked on some other phones at the time, it was specifically made for the Nokia Engage, Nokia's weird attempt at a mobile game device. It didn't last very long. It struggled because of its design flaws, its price, or quite possibly its marketing campaign. Are you ready to have a threesome in the back of a cab? Like what? Or maybe it was the Engage's poor game selection. Except for Shadowkey, out of the era of the 2000s mobile game series of Elder Scrolls, this was easily the best one. It plays pretty similar to Daggerfall, but in an extremely low poly 3D environment, with maybe 5 to 10 feet of radius rendering in front of you as you move. The last of the Nokia games was Oblivion Mobile in 2006. It allows you to take Oblivion wherever you go. It does follow the plot of Oblivion, but in a top-down environment, with limited movements and menus for merchants that you meet along the way. And while we're here in this era, I could not get it to play, but there technically is a demo still available for the canceled PSP release of Oblivion. It takes you on a new storyline within the same time frame of Oblivion, but the graphics, combat, and overall aesthetics honestly look pretty good. But it follows a very specific action storyline that's very linear. But even so, after being announced at E3, it wasn't spoken much of afterwards. If this had released in 2007 as planned, at the time I was really into playing this game Gun on my PSP, I would have been all over this in a heartbeat. By April of 2006, just 2 short months after its release, Oblivion had almost sold 2 million copies, blowing Morrowind completely out of the water. This is also at the time where internet virality and memes were starting to become a thing. And nothing was more meme-worthy than Oblivion NPCs.
I don't think we're going to make it out of here alive.
This is where they took everything that made Morrowind so epic and just added to it. A lot. The step out moment is the best in the series so far, after you create your character with the infamous Oblivion face design system, where it always feels like you can't really make a normal face, no matter what you do. So this is my character, Trolls 4, the Dickering. You exit the sewers and you have the entrance to an entire dungeon in front of you. You have a cave to your right, you got some mushies to pick and use for alchemy, a crab trying to bite your shins. For a second, you almost forget that your main quest is to go deliver this amulet as the Emperor's dying wish and kind of go into something intriguing. You're like, oh, let me check this out for a second.
3 hours later.
Skyrim does this the best, but Oblivion is a close second. As here, the devs really start to make that extra effort into making these elaborate underground mazes filled with puzzles and enemies, subplots within subplots, to really just completely lose yourself outside of the main quest. This is also the first Elder Scrolls game with all the NPCs having voice acting.
Farewell.
Including Todd Howard himself.
What? That really pisses me off.
Further adding to the immersive atmosphere of the province of Cyrodiil. And Bethesda finally replaced the terrible dice roll combat mechanic from all the previous games with a combat system we now know and love. When you hit something, you hit it every time. You get the mortar and pestle to perform alchemy and repair hammer to fix your armor and your weapons. A mechanic that in retrospect is kind of nice. Skyrim's crafting benches are more immersive, sure, but having these available on your person just allows you to spend more of your time exploring. But what really sent Oblivion over the top for me is the fourth and final pillar to Elder Scrolls' success: Bethesda absurdity. The NPCs within their worlds aren't like people in the real world. They're always kind of over the top. The obvious example to point to in Oblivion is the adoring fan.
Bye.
Even if you've never played Oblivion before, you've not missed this guy on the internet. These types of characters and interactions were evident in the predecessors, but Oblivion is really where they start leaning into it.
'Cause I can be your friend right now.
It's really a comedic game at most times, not just because of the typical Bethesda bugs, which are great, but the writing and the side stories. And this is what they intended. From here on out, any content that Bethesda puts out has had this undeniable level of quirkiness that sets them apart from other RPGs.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
Almost immediately after the release of Oblivion, seeing the insane levels of popularity that World of Warcraft was getting at the time, because they had just released their first expansion, Burning Crusade, and it was blowing up. I mean, it literally sold 2.4 million copies on the first day. So ZeniMax began developing their first MMO and built it with many of the standard MMO tropes for leveling system, professions, and gathering and more gathering. But it was an interesting new way to experience this universe. While personally, I prefer to play the games built for single player, it's still the only game in the series where you get to see all of Tamriel in some pretty beautiful 3D graphic environments. I mean, I just play it for that alone. Casually questing with randos and exploring familiar locations in Morrowind, Skyrim, and Cyrodiil, but in a beautifully rendered environment. Unless you again had Battlespire in 1997, this is the only Elder Scrolls multiplayer experience. So my goal here was to make a new friend. Hello. To whisper, hello, I'm inside you. But most players, I'd imagine, just want to go about their business, probably on an alt account, and didn't want to bother with some low-level scum like me. My bunkmate in the Navy was always playing it, and he'd try to rope me into buying an Xbox One to play with him. But I don't know, I just never did. Fortunately, the starting area of every MMO is always full of dopamine hits. You level up with basically no challenge and just relaxing, learning the mechanics, and completing easy low-level quests. Because it's an MMO, the storyline changes throughout the seasons. So depending on when you play, your experience will be different from mine. Not long after the tutorial, I met Tozy and challenged him to a duel. Because I beat them without taking any damage, I thought I was playing against a bot till they said, "We are do the same task?" No, they're not a bot. They're just Chinese. Toe and I went to take on several quests, running around the remainder of the playthrough. We even murdered a guy. Now, these games can be found on multiple mobile platforms, but most people get them on the Apple Store, so I'm just going to call them the iPhone games. Fight me. But remember, I have a sword, so probably not a good idea. First one's a card game, 2017's The Elder Scrolls Legends, not to be confused with 1997's An Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespire. And I'm not a Magic the Gatherer or whatever, so I struggled. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a little slow. I can just never seem to grasp card games with like lots of rules. I'm more of a Uno or a Go Fish kind of girl. I think the concept is cool. As you'll be able to tell, the devs clearly put a lot of effort into adding lots of familiar lore to the game. But I mean, I was losing in the tutorial. Your goal is to attack the character on the other side till their health points hit 0. And I just kept using what I thought were different attacks, and I ended up healing the enemy AI. So I didn't do very good. The second game is 2019's The Elder Scrolls Blades. It's not the perfect port of their typical RPG experience to mobile, but it's not a bad game either. Does it shamelessly plug their microtransactions pretty often? Yes. Are there upgrades with timers that require you to wait hours sometimes to access them? Also yes. For the quest, you complete them by raiding instance dungeons. The combat system's actually kind of reminiscent of the original games. Every attack you land can do different amounts of damage based on several different factors, and you can upgrade your weapons and armor as well as your spells and attributes. So I mean, for being a free-to-play game on your phone, this is easily something I'd play while sitting on the toilet waiting to go into the dentist office. And so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Oh wait. I remember 11/11/11 like it was yesterday. Junior year of high school. My friends and I went into the city for the midnight release of Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. And this wasn't like the launch of Morrowind or Oblivion. This, at this point, it was like a cultural phenomenon.
The graphics look amazing on the videos I've seen. It's ridiculous. I've never seen it anywhere near this. Wow. Even for Call of Duty.
There were hundreds of eager fans. There were girls dressed up like elves and whatnot. And I'm not promoting it, but there was this guy on his tailgate dressed as a Khajiit snorting coke, and he kept asking us if we wanted any moon sugar. It was honestly the craziest midnight release that I've ever been to. What a time it was to be a gamer at an inner city GameStop midnight release. We all got our copies, and then we went back to the friend's house that had multiple monitors so we could all hook up our Xbox 360s at the same time. And I can remember sitting down once everybody had popped their games in, and it was just silent. Originally, I'd planned to do this video with all the Elder Scrolls in order, but I mean, Skyrim is undeniably the peak of the series. It's the culmination of everything that they had developed and been building up to since 1994. Todd Howard led a team of roughly 100 to create one of the most moddable, freeform experiences in gaming. It was so good, in fact, that they re-released it in 2013 with the Legendary Edition, then again in 2016 with the Special Edition, then on the Switch, then on VR, the Alexa,
add wrapping paper to the shopping list.
Woman, I'm the Jarl of White
Alexa.
And then the Anniversary Edition. Rumor has it that the Super Ultra Edition is going to be releasing in 2030 to hype up the launch of Elder Scrolls 6. But Skyrim is a close contender for my favorite game of all time. The story of the Dragonborn with the shouts and the improved combat system. The removal of a character class selection and replacing it with one of my favorite RPG systems for upgrading whatever skills you felt like. The insanely detailed map with random encounters filled with unique NPCs and locations. The best dungeon system in the series, where each crypt and cave was individualized with puzzles, enemy types, and loot. And of course, the mods.
Let me show you the throat of the world, Gluck Gluck.
Higher. No. This game is not difficult. You make it hard. You did.
They can't hurt us.
Position.
But we've got a problem. I have played and beat Skyrim countless times, but there's one way that I've never played this game: virtual reality. In fact, I haven't really used this thing at all. So I mean, I thought it would be kind of cool, you know, but I'm not lying to y'all. It is honestly one of the coolest and most immersive experiences ever. I've always kind of overlooked VR gaming, but that feeling we spoke about at the beginning of peaceful loneliness, it's applied tenfold when you're playing it in VR. And the general quirkiness of Bethesda games, I mean, I don't think it gets any better than this. I'm gonna try to pull it out. Hey, what the hell? Oh no, I'm just trying to play Frisbee. It's just Frisbee. I don't know, it was just a Frisbee. Ah! I need you to hide me. They're coming. I just wanted to play Frisbee. So there is one mod that I tried for days to get working for this video, because after seeing it in action, I think that it's the future of all RPG games. Mantella.
I have a letter here that is proof that Jarl Skald is working with the Imperial Legion.
These accusations are preposterous.
What this mod does is it connects ChatGPT and OpenAI to Skyrim NPCs, allowing them to converse with you without falling out of character. In its current form, it's pretty rudimentary, and if you're not well versed in modding like myself, you might not even be able to get it to work. But the concept of being able to have unique conversations with NPCs that you've known for years, like conversations that only literally you have had with them, there's nothing I want to see professionally developed into a game more than this. And even with all the success of games like Skyrim with their modding, I can't help but look towards the future. Bethesda, Talos willing, this video gets back to you. But each game that you've made has taken some sort of leap forward. This, in my opinion, should be the next leap, a built-in chat model for Elder Scrolls 6. Not to just converse with the NPCs, but with potential to create your own quest by just asking an NPC if they need anything. The possibility of asking or convincing an AI to do something, such as letting a prisoner go or kill their neighbor for a cow. Now, of course, Bethesda misfired a bit with Starfield, though it's really not a bad game, and the creation engine they run their games on is outdated, but overall, Bethesda and ZeniMax Studios have brought us some of the most impactful games of our time. So I just wanted to take a second to say, thank you, Todd. Thank you for having a vision to focus not so much on the quantity or the sheer size of a game, but to put all efforts into the quality, into the handcrafted storytelling and the freeform experience, to go anywhere and do anything, with unique characters that even after all these years live rent-free in my head. And I want to thank the Bethesda mod community, most of whom create new experiences in these games for us completely free. They're the reason that decades later we can play these games in all sorts of new ways. You guys and gals are one of the main components of why these games are as good as they are. So next time you download a mod from Nexus, toss a coin to the modder in their donations tab. I'm sure they would appreciate it. And if you enjoyed watching this journey through the entirety of Elder Scrolls, as much as I enjoyed playing them, consider subscribing for the next one. And leave a like or something for the algorithm. Then join me as I explore the next series right here. It's probably gonna be Fallout since I'm on a Bethesda kick now. But you gotta go and you gotta click it or something. You gotta click it. You can't stay here. I can't leave until you. My kids are outside the room. It's 100 degrees in this room. Just click it.